This fungus-looking plant has no leaves or roots. It rarely pops above the surface, but when it does, its fleshy flower reeks like rotting meat.
Ew.
To reproduce, it imprisons its pollinators like a Venus flytrap before releasing them unharmed back into the wild. This plant has been dubbed the strangest plant in the world, but it might just be the most misunderstood. This is Hydnora. Hi, I'm Tasha the Amazon, and you're watching Floralogic. Today we're talking about some of the weirdest flowering perennial plants that you'll likely ever lay your eyes on. Hydnora. If you want to see these elusive weirdies, you'll have to look very long and hard in semi-arid regions of Madagascar, Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. Currently, we only know of 8 species, but that number is probably due to the fact that they rarely appear above the surface, and when they do, it's in remote locations. 2 Hydnora species were discovered for the first time in recent years, but only because they were found in markets in South Africa and Mozambique being sold as traditional medicine. So what makes this plant so weird? Well, first of all, just take one look at it. Hydnora doesn't look so much like a plant, but more like some claymation monster from a 1950s horror movie. They look so alien and unplant-like that they are often mistaken for fungi. The next order of weirdness comes when you give it a whiff. Befittingly, this plant doesn't smell flowery like other flowering plants. Instead, it reeks of rotting flesh. More on why this stink is so important later. Adding to its rap of being an absolute weirdie, Hydnora will only very rarely and sporadically appear on the surface, and only to flower. And when they do, they can cause significant damage, even having been known to hulk out and bust through asphalt to reach the surface. So, if all that doesn't speak enough to their status as the world's strangest plant, let's dive a little deeper into their unusual attributes. Hydnora is one of the rare 1% of flowering plants that's parasitic. In this case, specifically, holoparasitic, meaning it gets 100% of its nutrients and carbon from its host plant. As a result, Hydnora is one of the few in the plant kingdom that have no leaves at all. The primary function of leaves is to convert sunlight into energy through photosynthesis. But Hydnora have completely lost their ability to photosynthesize. Therefore, they have no use for leaves. They spend most of the time underground as a rhizome or stem. Not one to conform, Hydnora also completely lacks roots and instead uses specialized projections called hystoria that worm their way into their host roots to suck up their nutrients, water, and minerals. This vampiric behavior seems to perfectly complement their monster-like looks when they do eventually pop up on the surface. Hydnora are choosy about the plants that they latch onto, only slurping the life from the roots of members of the legume, spurge, and torchwood families. The name Hydnora itself comes from the ancient Greek word hydnon, which means truffle, a fitting name for a fungi-looking plant that spends most of its life hidden underground. Because they have no leaves or roots, researchers have struggled since their first description to classify Hydnora. Initially, these plants were lumped into the Rafflesia genus. If you follow the channel, you'll recognize this one as the genus that contains Rafflesia arnoldii, aka the corpse flower, another holoparasite that takes the prize for the largest individual flower in the world. More recent genetic sequencing, however, has placed Hydnora squarely in the Aristolochiaceae, or birthwort family. Most of the species of this family are tropical woody vines, so it makes sense that without the genetic information about these plants, researchers struggled to make the connection. Hydnora and their closest relatives are, in fact, magnoliids, some of the earliest diverging lineages of flowering plants. This makes Hydnora one of the most basal parasitic plants we've ever discovered. So while we know that Hydnora acts like a monster underground by sucking the life from its host plant, what's even stranger is what it does after the rains when it finally pops up to the surface to reproduce. Its reproductive style is described as brood site mimicry with imprisonment. The fleshy flowers of Hydnora emit a stink from structures called osmophores that is similar to rotting flesh that insect pollinators, specifically beetles, simply cannot resist. To make sure the stink goes as far as possible, some Hydnora species are even able to heat themselves up slightly in a process called thermogenesis. Imagine an aromatherapy oil diffuser, but filled with rotting flesh instead of lavender. Once their insect pollinators catch a whiff, they find their way inside the flower, and this is where the imprisonment part comes in. The beetles will feed on the osmophores until they fall deeper into the plant onto its anthers and become dusted in pollen. Then they'll fall even deeper still onto the cushion-like stigma, thereby pollinating the flower. When trapped inside the Hydnora, the pollinators are free to move around, but can't escape due to the high slippery walls and the cage-like bristles that edge the petals. Once their job is done, the Hydnora's petals will open up and the beetle is free to move on to the next Hydnora. This unique catch and release strategy helps to ensure the further survival of the species. Once the flower withers, the ovary turns into a large swollen fruit containing thousands of tiny black seeds that the local jackals and other small mammals go wild for. The Afrikaans name for Hydnora is actually jakalskos, which means jackal food. The outer layer of the fruit is thick and leathery, but inside it's white, starchy, mealy, and very sweet, sometimes being described as having the texture of a potato. The fruit of Hydnora are also used as traditional food for humans, which makes sense because they sound kind of delicious. Of course, after the corpse stink has cleared. The fruit, rhizomes, and flowers of this plant are also used in traditional medicine to treat kidney, bladder, stomach, and throat conditions, as well as bacterial infections and menstrual problems. They're used as an antidiarrheal and to treat a myriad of diseases like cholera, typhoid, and even cancer. The high level of tannins in Hydnora make it super astringent, which may explain why it's used traditionally to treat so many gastrointestinal conditions. Although Hydnora was first described 250 years ago, we still know surprisingly little about these plants. The fact that they spend most of their lives hidden underground makes them extremely hard to study. We don't know much either about germination or seedling development. The fact that they've proven almost impossible to cultivate in a lab environment makes it even harder to learn more about these plants. Despite being elusive, they aren't endangered and are fairly common, lurking just under the soil of their native habitat. While people claim that Hydnora is the strangest plant in the world, like so many other things branded weird, the lack of research into these plants proves that they're probably just wildly misunderstood. Once we're able to learn more about them, they may just be dubbed the world's most extraordinary plant. So what should we talk about next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. Bye! Please say hi to your friends. Look who it is! Bye. The next order of weirdness comes when we give Let's give a little dive a little deeper into their unusual attributes. Sometimes it's good to wiggle. This vampiric behavior seems to perfectly complement their monster-like looks when they do eventually pop up on the surface. Rafflesia, I got my amnesia, 'cause I smelled Rafflesia. The tip of the tongue, the teeth, the tooth. Okay, Aristolochiaceae. Or Aristolochiaceae. That can't be right. That cannot be right.
Aristolochiaceae. Break it into words.
Aristolochiaceae.
More recent gene sequencing, however, has placed Hydnora squarely in the Aristolochiaceae or birthworth family.
That's the one!